Hey everybody, happy Tuesday. Welcome to day 2 of our challenge. Popping in to see if we are live and ready to go. There we are. All right, who do we have here with us right now? Let's see. Put you guys over on the other monitor so I can watch comments at the same time. So how's everybody been doing with day 1? We've got a lot of really great posts going on in the group. And a lot of really cool things have come through. Okay, so we've got 3 people watching right now. Facebook's not telling me exactly who's here right now yet, though. That's okay. Oh, Jennifer's here. You noticed the Care Bear, huh? Yep, got a Care Bear, got some My Little Ponies. I pulled some of my my power symbols out. We're going to get into that. Hey Jennifer, good to see you. Come on, computer, please cooperate. Okay, Lisa's here. Good to see you. Hi, Lisa. Alright, so we've had a lot of really cool posts going on in the group. A lot of people are getting a lot of clarity. The thing that I've noticed the most about what's been coming up for a lot of people is that they don't share enough of their own personal life. They don't share enough of their story with their audience. And that is key. It's integral, because I say this all the time, but people buy solutions to their problems, but really what people actually buy is your energy. They buy what it is that you represent, what you embody, and they buy that because they want that for themselves. They buy your energy, they buy your lifestyle. So yes, they do buy solutions to their problems, but there's a lot of coaches out there, there's a lot of readers out there, there's a lot of people that are offering very similar things to what you are trying to sell. Not always, but most of the time, there's a lot of people out there who are trying to become tarot readers or life coaches and things like that, or doing some of these more specialized things like mediumship and things like that. But what really separates you from your audience is that connection that you make, and the only way that people are going to be connected to you and your brand is by sharing about your life. And for a long time, I was always like, I never thought my life was interesting enough to share. I never made the connection between why someone would actually be interested in knowing about my life and knowing what I think about things and what my opinions are about things. And it wasn't really until I started sharing more and opening up more and saying, who cares who thinks I'm interesting? I'm just going to live my life, and if someone is attracted to that, or I'm going to find my tribe that way. So it's really interesting. Hi, good to see you, Angie and Anya and Barbara. Good to see everybody. So I'm curious, what has been coming up for you regarding day 1? Is there a pattern that you're noticing? Is certain things coming into a little bit more focus about where the disconnect is between you and what you're trying to sell, what the products or services are that you're trying to get out into the world? Are you beginning to see where it's more about your energy and what you're putting out rather than anything else really that has to deal with sales? It's really interesting. Hey, Lisa. So today we're going to talk about a couple different things. I'm going to hit a couple different targets. I want to talk about a little bit about the law of attraction. I want to talk a little bit about some inner child work. We're going to go through today's prompts together, and then I'm going to give you the workbook. And then I'm just going to let you go for it and play and have fun. Jennifer specifically, it was really interesting seeing your post because it was very much like inner child stuff, and I got really excited because I was like, ooh, we're going to talk about that today. And Rachel also had something really interesting that came up, and she was talking about, I don't know if you read Rachel's post, but she was talking about like the big picture of her brand being this house, and she had envisioned the inside of the house that has a one vibe, and then the outside of the house has a different vibe. And what she was getting was a clairaudient psychic information about what it is that her subconscious and her consciousness is trying to tell her. So I thought it was really interesting. We're going to talk about that a little bit. Hey Lynn, good to see you. Actually, I'm going to move you guys back over because it just doesn't seem, give me just a minute, just doesn't seem to be working out over here. It keeps cutting the video in half. So I don't know if that's my problem or if that's a Facebook problem. Let me just see real quick. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the law of attraction. Specifically, we're going to talk about getting into the vortex. I know we have some law of attraction people here. And if you've ever heard of the law of attraction and the vortex, let me know. Give me a heart or say yes, whatever you want to do. The law of attraction is basic. It was really kind of coined by a woman named Esther Hicks. And she has, Jennifer says, totally loving the Care Bear and My Little Pony. Yeah, see, okay, now it's working. I'm actually getting the comments now. So I don't know what was wrong before, but we're fine. So there's this woman named Esther Hicks, and she has a husband. His name is Jerry Hicks. And we all saw the movie The Secret, right? Like, that came out, like, probably, what? Like, between 5 and 10 years ago. I can't remember how long it's been. Like, 7 years ago or so, maybe-ish. And what that was, Brandy says, not much on the vortex. Okay, good, cool. The Secret was really groundbreaking for a lot of people, and it really started this whole movement. The movement was already here, already. Faith says, I listen to Abraham every night now. Yep. So the movement was already actually there, but it was that movie, The Secret, that popularized it, that really brought it turned it into a movement. They've since redone The Secret, and I have my own thoughts about that, but Jerry and Esther Hicks were originally on The Secret, the movie, and they have been since cut out from that. There's like a whole thing about that and why that is and what that means, and I have my own thoughts about that, but definitely look at the research on it. So there is Esther Hicks is a channel. She's a medium, and she channels a group of beings. And they go by the name of Abraham, just to make it more simple. It's a collective being that goes by the name of Abraham. Jennifer says about to get the Law of Attraction Coach certification. Right. Yep, I knew you would like this too. And they talk about this concept called the vortex. And they have a whole book about it. It's called like Getting into the Vortex or something like that. You can get it on Amazon. I highly recommend that book. Even if you just read the first chapter. The book is really, really long. It goes into a lot of different things. It talks about the vortex itself. It talks about, how dealing with parents and upbringing. It even goes into sexuality and things like that. So it hits a lot of different places. But even if you just got that book and just read like the first chapter, I think that you would have a really good background in what it is that I'm going to be talking about today. We only have we have limited time together, so I'm not going to be able to express the full extent of it. So I highly recommend you get that book and check it out and do some research on your own. So the vortex is, it's a lot like, have you ever said things like, I'm in the zone, or this is my jam? In the zone, this is my jam, or what's the other one I'm in my flow, right? This is usually typically when you have like a good day, when you have a productive day, when you're feeling good physically, you're feeling good emotionally, you're feeling good mentally, and you feel motivated. There's something that is bringing you joy. You otherwise feel a sense of happiness, that fleeting sense of happiness that a lot of us chase. And the vortex is allegedly a vibrational place that you can tap into to be able to like feel that sense of joy and contentment and inspiration, and to feel that sense of feeling good physically and mentally and emotionally more often than just having one good day. It kind of turns into a lifestyle. Does that make sense with everybody so far? Is everybody with me? So you have these days that are really good, and you have these days where you're on fire and you're inspired and you're creating and you're coming up with packages and you're writing copy and you're posting on all your social media profiles and you're actually asking for the sale. And then what happens is that usually only happens for most people a couple days a week if they're lucky. Now, if you start to read that book, she talks about, well, Abraham talks about, I'll say she and he and Abraham intermittently, it's all the same person. So if I say she or he or Abraham, just I'm talking about Abraham in general, which is the collective beings that Esther Hicks channels. I know it's confusing. So it's about getting into a space where you can have that type of feeling just about every day. I haven't tapped into it to where I'm feeling that every single day. I don't know if that's completely possible, and it might be my belief that that's not possible that makes it impossible for me. It's a conundrum. I don't know. I don't have all the answers. But I do know that since I started reading about the vortex and doing the inner child work, I started doing that in January of this year. And my business has just exploded. I used to struggle so much just getting inspiration on like what to say on Facebook. I had no idea what to put together for a marketing campaign. I had no idea how to even talk to people about how to sell my services. It was very elusive for me, and I felt like I was chasing this thing that I couldn't get. And so I inevitably made myself sicker and more miserable and more depressed and things like that. And then I stumbled upon the vortex, and I stumbled upon really getting in touch with my inner child work. So hold on, let me go back to the vortex because I'm kind of getting into the inner child work right now. And so what the vortex is, what it is it's called the assembly of cooperative relationships. Cooperative relationships on all fronts. Cooperative relationships, a cooperative relationship with yourself, a cooperative relationship with your parents, with your siblings, with your coworkers, with anything and everything. It's a space, it's a vibrational space and a physical space. I think it can be both physical and vibrational that you can get into, in which you are at a sense of peace regarding everything that's going on in the world, regarding your upbringing, regarding all of the disappointments that people have put you through. And the reason why I'm talking about this whole Doreen Virtue thing so much this week has a lot to do with this, because it's a hard lesson for a lot of us, right? And we're not going to be able to get into the vortex until we process this whole thing, what's going on with Doreen. She is just one of many people out there that have been through something like this. And for us, she's kind of like our, for a lot of us, some of you might not have followed her, which is totally cool, but for a lot of people, she was the authority on New Age spirituality, universal Unitarianism, New Age Christianity, that sort of thing, and bridging that gap, between the New Age misfits and like the Christian misfits, that neither one of them really fit into either side. And she created this bridge. She created this place where both misfits could commingle, and she created this vortex in which there was this cooperation, this assembly of cooperation between people who had otherwise been on opposite sides of the fence and who had, been through disappointment or judgment and things like that. And a lot of us we are spiritual entrepreneurs, so we carry a lot of that leftover dogma of the church and that leftover, what society thinks about us, and all of the past trauma, the ancestral trauma going on, over, keeping women obedient and things like that. So it's a really interesting case study. If you can try to detach emotionally from it when you're ready, If you're still processing it, if this is still news for you, like, we've been talking about this since April. So a lot of us have already kind of processed this information. So some of you might be through the processing. Some of you might be just now starting to get those feelings of betrayal that we were feeling back in April when we realized something was going on with that. And what this really is just one big good lesson. And it's a difficult lesson, but it's going to grow you. It's going to evolve you. Tammy says, just got to say this is where I need to be. Awesome. I'm glad you feel home here. And so the Doreen Virtue thing, it is related, but it's not related, but it is related because everything's related, right? It's interesting, that whole process thing. It's kind of something else, but it's not something else. And that's what the vortex is about, and it's really interesting to think about the vortex in this way, whereas you, as an observer, basically in the vortex, as an observer, you are a co-creator of that experience, even as an observer. So even if you weren't a Doreen Virtue fan, or even if you are just like watching this whole thing go down and you're just observing it, even in your observation, you are still a co-creator, because whatever you learn from that experience, you're going to go forward and you're going to affect reality in whatever way, shape, or form. So the vortex is really interesting in that even if you don't feel like you're involved, even if you feel like you're an outsider or you're just an observer, you actually are a co-creator of that experience. And that can be a reality check for a lot of people who are not participating, right? So the wisdom in that is that whether you participate or you don't participate, if you observe it, you are a part of it. And that can be relieving for some people, or that can be terrifying for some people. Just depends on where you are at in the process, right? And so the goal of aligning yourself with that thought is to be able to be in the vortex for longer periods of time, being able to take these traumatic situations and transmuting them, alchemizing them into something constructive that you can use to affect the reality, the situation of it in a way that you feel is appropriate, right? So creation is really important for us because that's where creation happens in the vortex. Think about the days that you have good days, right? You get a lot done. You're very productive. Maybe you do all your house chores and you even talk to a couple potential clients, or you put out a blog post or something like that. It's usually not a time when you are it's not like you feel like you're sacrificing anything. You just feel like a burst of energy, right? And you feel that creative fire within your belly. You usually feel it within your belly, your solar plexus, and your sacral chakras. We're going to get into that here pretty soon. But creation is specifically is good for anybody. It's something that everybody is able to do, to create your own things, to create your own reality, to create your own teachings, to create your own workshops, your own packages, and what you want to sell and how you want to make the world a better place, right? So creation is okay for anybody, because creation equals joy, it equals pleasure. It's fun to create, right? But for us spiritual entrepreneurs, it's extremely important because as an entrepreneur, you are a creator. That's how you make your money. That's how you make your living. You create things. You create packages, or you create workshops. You create things that solve problems. So if you aren't in the vortex, or you aren't feeling a sense of joy or happiness, or you aren't feeling like you are willing to create or that you can create, chances are you're probably not going to have a lot of things to sell. You're probably not going to make a lot of money, because what happens is you regurgitate a lot of what's already out there. Nothing that you say is really new or particularly interesting, and it doesn't grab a lot of attention. So a lot of us come from that, and that's part of the process too. A lot of us come from that. We read books like from Doreen Virtue and all of these popular people, no matter what field you're in. maybe James Van Prague or something like that if you're a medium, And what happens is in the beginning we really don't have a lot of our own ideas. We don't really know what we're doing. We know that we want to do something, we know we want to help people, and we're just in the beginning we're kind of grasping at straws. We don't really know. Or on the flip side of that, you might have too many ideas and you're not able to pinpoint and zone in on, one particular type of nature, one particular type of thing that you want to offer. And basically what both of those have in common is that nothing ever really gets done. There's not a lot of action being taken place, and it's really just, you just keep going back in this cycle. And it's like an anti-vortex. It's more like a singularity, a black hole where things get sucked in, all the energy is gone. So if you think about the vortex, think about it this way. The singularity is where a lot of us are when we don't have when we don't have a very solid idea of our identity and who we are, what we like, what we're actually good at, things like that. And that's what this whole challenge is really supposed to do. It's supposed to teach you and show you, enlighten these things that you're really good at, that you really find joyful, so you can get into the vortex much faster. Does that make sense with everybody? Can you relate to that at all? Lynn says, I agree, evolution in progress. Tammy says, don't know what's going on, and sounds like don't want to be. Well, there's good and bad when it comes to knowing and not knowing. So yesterday, I was talking to Rachel on her post, her day one post, and she posted about, it was really interesting, she posted about her bigger vision for her business being like a house. She had the clairvoyant image of a house. And in one area of the house, like the inside area of the house, catered to basically one specific feeling, one specific vibration, vibe, right? And she mentioned that the inside was more like, what she pictured was a fireplace in the middle of the living room, right? And there's a snowstorm going on outside. And as she envisioned what it is that she actually does for people, she envisioned welcoming people in the door to get in and out of the cold, right? And then she had a second vision in which she saw this summer garden house, right? And in that, it was more like a tea garden in the warm summer months. And it was like a place to come spend an afternoon. And this was really interesting for me to read because her vision is almost two separate things. There is a balance between it. Basically, what it comes down to is the things that I noticed were warmth, because of the warm fire and the warm summer, being welcoming, being a sanctuary, and the people getting some sort of respite or relaxation or rejuvenation from being weary due to outside elements they can't control. So if I psychoanalyze that much like a dream, and it makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of really interesting things that you can pull from that about who you are and what type of services that you're wanting to put out there. Jennifer says totally relate. Other Jennifer says yes. Susie's, I'm just going to call you Jennifer Morales. I'm just going to call you Jen. Susie, I have too many ideas. I need to harness them. Having too many ideas is better than not having any ideas. And Susie, you have your Goddess Academy, which is that's going to be your outlet for that, because you're going to be able to shift gears and pivot a little bit more. The academy, the membership program is going to have a little bit more of a flexibility, which is, I think, what's really going to be good for you, because you're going to be able to tackle a variety of topics as long as it's under that one umbrella topic, right? So Abraham has says everybody is born with a guidance system. Okay, so like your internal compass, what it shows you what you are attracted to, and it also shows you what you're not attracted to through contrast. Contrast being any type of traumatic experience or something that you don't feel good about. It has a negative connotation for you, and however that manifests. Some people have a negative feeling about it, and some people might not even know why they are not attracted to it. They just know they're not attracted to it. And a lot of the times intuition is not so much coherent, so it's a lot of what it comes down to is trusting that your intuition is going to lead you in the right direction, is going to lead you to the things. And it's interesting, the intuition thing, because we're going to get into this here, but the intuition is different from what your beliefs and values and your judgments are. And that can be a little bit difficult for some people, because if they haven't worked through the process of being untriggered, if they haven't done a lot of, they haven't started on their spiritual journey, right? Then they've probably got a lot of leftover triggers they probably got to deal with. And once those triggers are dealt with and processed and integrated, and you bring awareness to those triggers, then listening to your intuition becomes, 10 times easier, because now it's not a matter of, working through what is actually triggering you, but instead, being in a place where you can trust your intuition. Sad I have to go to work now. That's okay, Tammy. I'll send out the replay later tonight. Hey, Alex, good to see you. And so we call this intuition. Abraham calls it guidance system. Some people call it your inner compass. There's a lot of different names for it. We tend to call it intuition in this field, in this niche, the spiritual entrepreneurs. And it's interesting. So first we have like the beliefs and values, this notion of right and wrong, of good and bad, and it's usually indoctrinated into us as very young people from the ages of birth to about 12 years old. Your inner child, your beliefs about the world, about how you feel safe in the world, or if you feel the world is even a safe place to be, or, some people like me, I'll go into this more later, but my big thing was abandonment, right? And so you learn a lot about the world, and you carry a lot of these ships on your shoulders, and usually it comes from ages birth to 12 years old. That's a very good starting point for most people. There are many different ways that you can go about doing this, but for today, we're going to really just focus on the inner child. We're going to just start at the origin. We're going to start at our genesis, right? And from there, you can move up through the system and work on these other different types of modalities and things like that. But inner child work is really interesting for a couple of reasons. And, I also found it interesting with Rachel's post that she was talking about having these two very different, distinct, almost personalities or desired vibe or mood for her business. And they were at odds. They were kind of on opposite spectrums. Has anybody dealt with this before? Usually it manifests in, having too many ideas and being pulled in multiple directions, usually two directions. And often those directions are almost at odds with one another. They're almost a little bit like polar opposites in a way. Now, if you struggle with coming up with ideas, it could be because you have more than two distinct personalities, which is totally, totally possible. My own personality, I probably have, I would say, 4 or 5. So if you feel like you are struggling because you are being pulled in 2 different directions, it's very normal to feel that way. And I don't think that a lot of people talk about this. I think that this is something that is uncomfortable for people to talk about. I don't know if it's because of the whole stigma with being schizophrenic or having, mainstream society doesn't really understand that, especially multi-passionate people like us. We tend to be able to go in many, many different directions, and that can be very difficult and frightening for people to understand who are just struggling to do anything with their one personality. You know what I mean? So I hope that makes sense. I hope I'm not just rambling like a crazy person, which it happens. So we have our distinct personality for sure that is basically influenced upon you by your authority figures, by your parents, by your teachers, your siblings. It's what you learn about the world in that first 12 years of your life. That is one distinct personality that you have. And you're always going to be in this space of trying to find some level of approval with that, which could be at odds with who you truly are. Who you truly are is another aspect of your personality, right? This is what we call the true self. It could be at odds with the beliefs and the values and these notions of like right and wrong and good and bad that our authority figures kind of indoctrinated us into. I'll give you one tangible example that probably some of you deal with. If this isn't making sense, perhaps maybe you need an example. People who are brought up in very strict religious upbringings, who themselves are not in alignment with that strict religion. Does that make sense? So it doesn't always happen this way. Sometimes you can be born into a family and you can be born into a society and a culture that is in alignment with who you truly are, but it doesn't happen for everybody, okay? And so what happens is we spend, after 12 years old, from 13 on up, we spend a good grip of our life in active rebellion, and we also suppress that true self because we are focused on getting that outside approval. Jennifer says makes sense. Jen says makes a lot of sense. So this is probably going to not apply to every single person, but it's going to apply to a lot of you. But either which way you go about it, you're still going to have a couple distinct personalities. And it's that getting into the vortex is that ability to recognize our true self, right? And it presents itself in hints, in feelings, however you get psychic information, whether you're claircognizant and you just have clear knowing, whether you're clairvoyant and you get images, like Rachel got an image of the house that was speaking to her, the house, the inside and the outside. It's going to present itself to you in different ways, whether you're clairaudient and you hear this voice, you hear your higher self talking to you, or you talk to your spirit guides, you talk to your angels, that sort of thing. There's many other, different psychic abilities and how you're going to ultimately get that information. So pay attention to that. Pay attention to that. Those subtle things. If there's a phrase or something that's coming up, write it down. Make sure you make a note of it. Because what that is your intuition is leading you towards the true authentic self. The self that is unburdened by trying to get other people's approval, right? And there's a really cool way that we can find a lot about who our true self is, and we find that through regression through the first 12 years of our life, and that's what today's prompts are going to talk about. And it's interesting too because we might not know exactly why we're being drawn to like certain things, but we know instinctively that there's something there, and it's because it's persistent. It's almost an obsession. It's whatever it is that brings you joy and makes you happy and makes you feel like a child, makes you feel like a kid. Before you were burdened by having to go to school and go to college and get a job and do something with your life and all of these expectations that are placed upon us, right? So, and it's interesting too because, for most people, between their 20s and 30s is a time reserved kind of for coming to terms with all of that. We move out of our parents' house. We're off at college by ourselves. We make a lot of stupid mistakes. But we also find out a lot about what our limits are, what we actually truly like, and all of that other stuff that we've carried around, it just kind of starts to fall away. And we begin to kind of find out what we truly want versus what is expected of us to want, right? And it can be difficult. It can be difficult to kind of distinguish between those two aspects because, it just depends on how close you are with your family and all of these other variables. There's so many different variables. So it might take you until you're 45. You might be 55 and just now starting to figure some of this out and figuring out what has been blocking you this whole time, right? And if this true self is repressed, it can take a lot longer to get to the root of the true self. It can take a lot longer for the true self to emerge. And as the true self kind of emerges, your intuition will only grow stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. And it's really interesting that it happens that way because it can't happen any other way, right? So if you really want to get your intuition up and your psychic abilities up, it starts with realizing what is, your true self. Paula says, always was way too serious. There's a lot of wisdom there for you, Paula. A lot of wisdom. And so what does this have to do with the vortex? What this has to do, the vortex, remember, is the assembly of cooperative relationships. As the true self emerges, as the intuition becomes more and more strong, you develop a cooperative relationship with your intuition. As you come to peace with understanding that some of these things that have been forced upon you, I talk about being forced upon you, but it's not really forced upon you if you realize that your parents are only indoctrinating you into what they were indoctrinated into, right? And it could be that they talk about this in the book, but they talk about how even someone who is in the vortex and creating from a place of joy and authenticity, it doesn't, even if you don't resonate with that and it's at odds with your true self, the interesting thing is that it almost provides some level of peace knowing that their intention was pure joy, knowing that their intention was not directed at us to punish us or to traumatize us, but they were creating from their vortex. And it can be really relieving for a lot of people when you begin to realize that nobody's really out to get you. Nobody is really out to brainwash you. Nobody's really out to manipulate you. Everybody has their own agenda. Everybody has their own true self. And I think that if you can come to terms with just being at peace with everybody else having their own intentions and values and beliefs and things like that, it's less triggering for you to exist, because then you almost give yourself permission to allow yourself to be in your own vortex, because you realize, oh, okay, well, they're in their vortex, and whatever it is, it's doing something for them. Whether I'm at odds with that or whether I'm not in alignment with that is irrelevant, because I have the permission to create from my own vortex and to speak from my own true self. Alex says, when you're developing your worldview at 4, you don't have any filters on what you hear, and the only people you hear are from your parents and close family members. And generally speaking, you trust them, so you believe yes, it's all about, yeah, yep. Very, very correct. Very correct there. And so today's exercise is really about journaling with the goal in mind to remind you about who you really are, you truly are. And as Alex very gracefully led into this, we find out who we truly are by going back to the times when those first memories that we can remember. And it's to help you kind of distinguish between the two or more aspects of your being. And like I said, you might have 3 or 4 or 5 aspects. It's okay to have many. And, especially children of divorced parents, that's me, who lived separately, you might even have multiple aspects based on those beliefs that each parent was trying to indoctrinate onto you. Remember? Because each parent is going to be creating from their own vortex, based on their own beliefs, their own values, their own agendas, right? So, especially children of divorced parents, you're going to have these multiple aspects of your personalities that are going to possibly seem at odds, maybe not, but possibly. And also there's childhood trauma that also influence these divergent aspects of yourself. And the goal is, I think, in a lot of ways, today is going to be very healing. It's going to be a very healing process, but the goal is not to fix you. The goal is not to eradicate these different aspects of yourself, okay? Instead, it's to find the truth in all of the aspects, to find the bottom line in all of the aspects, the similarities in all of them, to basically create one superior aspect, right? All of the things that you really enjoy and like out of all of these individual aspects, and creating within the vortex the super personality, the super ego. So again, like, the goal is not to eradicate these components, these fragments of yourself, because you can't eradicate and reach some sense of wholeness. It doesn't work that way, right? So it's very holistic. This is a holistic type of energy healing. And what you'll find, I think, is in this complexity of all of these different aspects that merge into one super personality of yourself, is what you're going to find is you're going to find an unending source of creation, because you're going to be able to pull from all of these different beliefs, all these different aspects of yourself, all of these different interests, and you're going to be able to find the similarity, and you're going to be able to appeal to your target market through those similarities. But you're going to be able to do it in such a way that you have unending inspiration, because you're pulling from so many different aspects. Does that make sense with people? Does everybody get that? So you're going to basically find a whole bunch of new inspiration without having to suppress or eradicate any part of you at all. So the goal, we're going to go through that. We're going to go through just a couple of them. There's a lot. We're also going to talk about the solar plexus and the sacral chakra. I think is really important. And basically, when you have all of these different personalities and all of these different aspects of yourself, all these different goals and what you want to do. For example, like I thought I wanted to be a nurse. I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. I thought I wanted to be a doctor. I had all of these different things that I wanted to be. Did I ever think I was going to be a tarot reader? No. That never even crossed my mind. But what I did is I took all of these different things and I took what they all really had in common, and I was able to create something totally unique and something totally fun and mystical and magical out of all of that. And it's just been really cool, because then some days I have my nurse hat on, some days I have different hats on, and it's so nice. It's so wonderful living in an integrated life, because I don't have to worry about, am I focusing on the right thing? Am I doing this right? Is my marketing in alignment with what I'm trying to sell? That sort of thing. Variance, Alex says, variance is a Japanese art form for pottery called kintsugi, that repairs broken pottery with lacquer dusted or mixed with powder, gold, silver, or platinum. And it's done because the art form believes that brokenness repaired is beautiful. Aww. And really, aren't psychics and healers broken and repaired and then they're strengthened? That absolutely. There is truth to the whole wounded healer thing. Yep. That's beautiful. Thank you, Alex. So what I really want to talk about, I spent 45 minutes talking about the leading up to what I really want to talk about, is that your inner child needs an ally. So I've been on many, many calls. I've been on many sales calls, many coaching calls. I've done over 5,000 paid readings. Okay, so I'm probably, I would say probably somewhere between 7,000 to 8,000 professional sessions that I've done in the last 5 years. And something that this comes up, I've noticed this. I don't have all the answers to explain why this is. I'm going to try to explain what I've noticed, but it's just something I've noticed, right? My intuition has led me to this place, so for some reason it's important to talk about. And sometimes that's enough. Just knowing that it's important is sometimes enough. What I've noticed is that while most of the world, the mundane world, okay, the non-spiritual world, the non-spiritual world, right? They develop primarily from their root chakras on up. Okay, most people get stuck in their root chakra, and a lot of people, like us, spiritual people, we actually evolve the opposite way. Most of us have a really supercharged crown and third eye chakra. A lot of us struggle with the root chakra stuff, and even the sacral chakra stuff. Does anybody else feel that way? If you know the chakra system. If you don't, this might not, how else can I put this? Basically, the chakra system is definitive points on your body, your physical body, that refer to some sort of energetic point, a vortex, again, if you will. And those specific points represent different types of things. For example, your crown chakra could represent faith, your connection to God, and your connection to everybody else, basically. It's your antenna, right? Your third eye chakra is about foresight. It's about seeing the bigger picture. It's like being able to visualize things. So, yes. Okay, Karen says yes. Okay, good. You're with me. I never really know. It's hard to judge sometimes because I can go off on abstract tangents. That's my thing. I'm an air sign. So we love to just talk about abstract things and debate about abstract things. So why does this happen, right? Why does this even happen this way? And the answer is lots of reasons, lots of variables. One that we're going to talk about today is childhood trauma. Also, along with that first aspect of your personality, right, that we were talking about the values and the beliefs that we are kind of indoctrinated into in the first 4 years, or first 0 to 12 years, but the first 4 years, as Alex pointed out, where you don't really have that filter, right? And this is a really good starting point, in my opinion, to find out why we are higher chakra based or lower chakra based. Not all of you in here will be higher chakra based, but some of you will be, and some of you will be lower chakra based. And it doesn't matter where you fall on the spectrum, because inner child work is really the bridge between, coming into full alignment, full balance with all of the chakras. I'll explain that here in a little bit. And when I talk about higher chakras and lower chakras, I don't mean in terms of like good and bad. I just mean in terms of location on the body. So the lower chakras are at like the tailbone, the ovaries for women, the testes for men, the solar plexus and around the stomach, abdomen. Heart is in the breastbone, the chest. Throat's in the throat. Let's see. Third eye right here, and then your crown on the top of your head. That's why the Jewish guys wear the, not only the Jewish guys, but Muslim women, that's why they wear the covering too. Yes and no, I see as it's both root and chakra bound, and those in between are malfunctioning. Perhaps. I think what I'm trying to say is that at the beginning of this whole journey is we are usually defaulted to one or the other. It's very rare that I come into contact with someone who is like has both a really strong crown and a really strong root. It's not very often that that comes into, it's usually you're either defaulted with the higher chakras or you're defaulted with the lower chakras. And it's part of the process, part of the journey to activate and rebalance all of them, right? And so how you are chakra based is going to really greatly influence in how you manifest, because each center manifests in a different way. The third eye chakra manifests through envisioning, right? The crown chakra manifests through faith. And it tends to be, the higher chakras tend to be more visually stimulated. And their manifestation abilities, from what I've dealt with, is they tend to be more focused on like the bigger picture in the long term. Whereas the root chakra and the sacral chakra, these lower chakras, the default tends to be that they manifest mostly through desire and emotion. Okay, so it's a little bit of a different manifestation process. And the lower chakra people, they tend to be more stimulated by feeling. It tends to be more of an impulsive thing. And their manifestation abilities, in my opinion, tend to be more focused on like the here and now and the present, the day-to-day type of operations. Whereas the higher chakra people tend to be on the long term. And there's pros and cons for each of those different defaults. So the higher chakra people can be really focused on the long term, and they can feel really discouraged in the day-to-day operations because it's not happening fast enough for them, or they haven't built their empire in a week or two, you know what I mean? And so what happens is that there's not a lot of action being taken place. There's a lot of ideas, and there's a lot of foresight about what the future holds for them in their business, but there's not a lot of actual action being taken place. Whereas the lower chakra people, they tend to be very stimulated every single day. They tend to show up every single day and take action, but their action might not be in alignment with their long-term goal, with their long-term vision. They might have difficulty actually figuring out what that is, and so their creations might be more sporadic and going in all of these different directions, and the lower chakra people can't really find that common ground to be able to figure out where they're actually going with it, whereas the higher chakra people tend to be more idea-based. They have all of these really complex, intricate plans and ideas, but when it actually comes to breaking it down into the pieces and actually taking action, that's where they struggle. So are you a higher chakra or a lower chakra based person on default? Where do you resonate the most with that? Either you have a really good idea about the long term and you can make really great complex plans, but you struggle taking that day-to-day action, or you're lower chakra based and you are awesome at taking action, but it might not make a lot of coherent sense, the actions that you do take. Jennifer, higher chakra. I was higher chakra personally when I first started out too. Stephanie, higher chakra. Lisa, higher chakra. Okay. Very interesting, right? Because we need to be able to come into full alignment. Faith says I suck at taking action. So to be able to come into alignment and activate all of these chakras, we have to be able to, like, Marley says, I feel I'm both, but they facilitate. Oh, that's interesting. Very interesting. I would even, Molly, if I were you, I would even start a whole separate journal that, like, talks about, you write down, like, the patterns that you see when you're really super, like, action-oriented and when you're really more long-term plan, because you might be able to find some sort of pattern in that. And remember, we're not trying to, like, eradicate, we're not trying to, like, fix you, we're not trying to, like, say you need to do one thing over the other. But if you can find that pattern, then you can almost, like, tap into that pattern and use that pattern as a creation vortex, right? Because you can identify when you need to take action and when you need to focus on the long term. And I would say, Molly, I'm kind of with you at this point. I have worked on everything down to my solar plexus, and this year I'm really working on my sacral chakra. So I still have root yet to go, but I facilitate between my third eye mostly and my solar plexus personally. Alex says, I'm in a chakra study group and we meet weekly to work on our chakras and make sure they're all open and that we can shut them down as we need to. Awesome. How do they, is that through like meditation and affirmations? Because what I want to say about that is that I think it's good that you work on it, but the meditations and the affirmations are like probably 10% of actually activating your chakras. Barbara says, I feel a little of both. Okay, good, good. Molly says, awesome suggestion. Yeah, try it out. You might find some sort of pattern and you might find when is your optimal time to create and when's your optimal time to make your strategy, right? Let's see, where are we at? Okay, so identifying, this is kind of where we're at now. Identifying where you're currently manifesting from is really key to understanding your likes and your dislikes regarding what type of advertising mediums that you like and your branding preferences, right? So if you are higher chakra based, you're probably really motivated by visual based things. And if you are lower chakra based, you're probably more motivated by the impulse, by the emotion, by the desire, right? So you can have a mixed bag of all of these, but I think it's really interesting and helpful and useful to identify which chakra is being activated at that point. When I did coaching, when I did tarot readings and coaching, I specialized in life purpose. I did life purpose readings specifically through angel cards and through astrology. And I did that for about 5 years on Etsy. And what I've noticed is that a lot of the people that I've worked with previously with that, they really struggle with taking the action, right? And I think that as you develop these chakras, as you identify these patterns within you, you're going to be able to move through these different energy centers, and you're going to be able to call upon, you're almost going to be able to invoke those specific manifestation specialties to manifest and like actualize in the real world. Alex says, your own phase. Stephanie, yes. Moon phases play into that too. Absolutely they do. I'm big on the moon and the moon's phases. Alex says, we use meditation and herbs and colors and we make moon water and put blue, red, orange stones in the water so that we make chakra water that's made for moon water. I think that is a really cool, like, metaphysical way to activate your chakras. But I would really love for you to start thinking about some ways that you can do it on a practical level and not so much the metaphysical, because right now what you're doing, what that is doing is it's just bringing to your attention the different like correspondences and things like that, and it's almost like you're using these things as magical tools to be able to invoke certain aspects of the chakras. But I think what you're going to find is if you go a little bit more of a practical route with it, and you're going to be able to activate those a lot faster and a lot quicker and a lot more in a way that is actually going to be helpful and tangible, and you're going to be able to actually see the results. I'm going to show you how to do that with your sacral chakra today. There's many different types of ways that you can activate your chakras, practically speaking, but today we're going to focus on the inner child, right? So the problem is really that, like, probably around 80% of the people that I've ever coached, probably 80%, I would say, 70 to 80%, are stuck in these higher chakras, and they can't really figure out how to activate these lower chakras. And the problem that I see is that a lot of people have like a lot of these $1 million ideas. Like, they have ideas that they could, take to Shark Tank or whatever that show is called, and where they buy your business ideas, and they can make $1 million, by the end of the year selling their product or their service, something like that. But they have all these wonderful ideas, but typically, like, they're broke still, they're unhappy, they're unmotivated, and that's because the lower chakras aren't really activated. They haven't been actualized yet. So inner child work is specifically really, really good for the solar plexus and the sacral chakras. And if you do the inner child work, if you do the psychoanalytical part of it, and you do the journaling, and you do the holistic part of it, what's going to happen is that you're going to, so the solar plexus is the chakra that is right in between the crown chakra and the root chakra, the solar plexus that's in the stomach. By doing inner child work, it's almost like a hack because you activate your solar plexus and your sacral, and so if you're a higher chakra person, you form this bridge between them, and it becomes much easier to balance and actualize these chakras. Okay. So some of the things that we're going to be talking about with that is, I think what you have to understand is that making money and running a business is really 80% mental and about 20% physical. Because once you come into an alignment with who you are, your true self, then making money and just all you have to do at that point is just show up. That's all you have to do. That's all I do anymore is I just show up. I have pages and pages of ideas, and I don't get caught up in the long term anymore. I don't get caught up in this whole I have to do it all right now, because what I do is I just show up and I do one day at a time, one idea at a time. Actualize it, then move on to the next, right? So I want you to kind of think back. If you want, you can grab your pen and paper right now. I want you to kind of think back to the earliest memory that you can imagine, that you can clearly recall. Doesn't matter what age, just the earliest memory that you can recall. And I want you to think about why you can recall it, because memories are often implanted by emotion, right? Good emotion and bad emotion, good and bad. So thinking about this earliest memory, I want you to see if you can identify which emotion is attached to that. And if you are feeling brave and you want to share that with us, I highly encourage you to do that. For me, my earliest memory that I have is a memory that is associated with embarrassment. And how that has manifested in my life is I was always of the mindset that I'm just going to embarrass myself, right? Why speak up? Why have an opinion? Why do anything if it's only going to embarrass me? Or if, and specifically it was a teacher that embarrassed me. So I learned that people who were smart, in a position of authority, meant to be there to protect me, were capable of embarrassing me. And so for a long time I avoided teaching, and I avoided trying to be smart or to display any sort of intelligence. And for a long time I played dumb because I was trying to avoid this feeling of embarrassment. Faith says, earliest memory brings tears surprisingly. Yeah, I'm going to try to do this without crying. I have no guarantees that is actually going to happen. I've already cried a lot this morning. Faith says, my brother whipped my little stuffy lamia across the room, and I knew he had heard it. I hugged it so tight, and I wish I could make her all better and know it was okay. Interesting. Is there an emotion, a single emotion that you can attach to that, Faith? I'm interested in that. Jennifer says, my earliest memory is telling my mom not to talk about my health issue anymore. I was about 7 years old. Okay. I was born with 4 kidneys and used to wet the bed a lot. Okay, so would that be embarrassment too? Embarrassment and feeling like an outsider because you're different. Karen says, my first memories were around the same age, under 2. So I'm not sure. By the way, my memory was at 3 years old. My earliest one, 3 years old. So I'm not sure which was first. One I was excited and the other I was afraid of my naughty curtains. Interesting. Why do you think you were afraid of them? What about it made you afraid? Very interesting things. So, Faith, I wonder if you have a chip on your shoulder about protecting people, protecting those who can't protect themselves. And so, Jennifer, you probably have something going on about where you have difficulty talking about your health because you have this implanted memory of embarrassment with it. And like perhaps that you can't trust authority figures because they're going to embarrass you. Karen says they looked like scary characters. Okay, interesting. Very interesting. Jennifer says it was definitely embarrassment and feeling like it didn't matter what I said because she kept talking about it so publicly. Okay. So you learn it doesn't matter what you say because people are going to do what they're going to do and they're going to, with the intention to embarrass you. Whether that was actually their intention or not, probably not, but that's what you learned about life. And my cousins would make fun of me. Okay, so I stopped talking about everything. So you're scared to be vulnerable. Faith says emotion, sadness, empathy for my stuffed animal because it didn't understand what was going on. Okay. I sensed that my lamb, like she felt like she was being punished. Okay. For doing something wrong and she didn't. Lamb equals needs and protection. Yeah. Molly, my early memory is associated with abandonment and shame, anger. I was less than 2. So Molly, I wonder if there is this pattern in your life where you tend to give up before things are actualized because you've learned that you're just going to be abandoned anyway, so as a self-protective mechanism, you do the abandoning first. Perhaps, I don't know. You know, I'm just taking a stab right now in the dark. Lynn, I remember crying on my 8th birthday when they started singing Happy Birthday. So you fear being the center of attention. Barbara, I had got bit by a dog, okay, at the age of age 3. My mother always tells me I act like someone is out to get me. Okay. Molly says, absolutely. Alex says, my earliest memory is being in my bedroom when I was maybe 3.
Sorry, I don't know that.
I was 3 and my parents were fighting and my father picked up my tea table and chairs and threw them at my mother and she chased him out of the house. The next memory I have is being in my mother's arms as we were at the police station as she was swearing out a no contact order. So that's, you learned that people who are supposed to protect you can hurt you, and specifically with men. So there could be a pattern there with men. I have that pattern too, by the way. Super on point. Yeah, it's very powerful. Now, if you can, I want you to think back to age 6. When you were in school or whether you were homeschool, finishing school and coming home or, going to the living room or whatever it is that you did. And I want you to think about some of the toys that you collected. I want you to think about some of the shows that you watched on TV. And what are some of the activities that you did? And I also want you to think about, did your personality at that point, at age 6, undergo any significant changes, right? Or are you still about the same? So if you're feeling brave, you can go ahead and share that. Alex says, so I spent 10 years in therapy getting over that shit, right? Yeah. So I have that first memory of feeling embarrassment and shame from a teacher, right? And then I have this other memory. So without going, I'm not going to go into too much detail because if I do, then I'll start crying and, then it's a mess and we have to get through this video today. I learned that this world was not a safe place because I had a father who resented my existence, resented my mother, and was of the mindset that if he couldn't have me, then nobody could. And I remember around about 4 or 5, being in hiding. And I remember, like, my mom turning the lights off and telling me to be quiet, because we couldn't make any noise and things like that. Because I had a father who threatened to kill us both. And that's my earliest memory about, like, the divine masculine. And it's really affected my life in a really integral way, because if you have this wound, especially with the masculine is all about the action, right? The lower chakras. If you have this wound about it, then it's very difficult to actually manifest things, to actually take action, to do anything. That was my first memory at around 4, 5, 6 or so. And I remember it was at that point where I really started getting into My Little Ponies. I really started getting into Care Bears. I was also an only child, and my mother worked a lot, and I stayed home from a very, very early age. And I didn't have any siblings, and I really didn't have any. I have cousins, but I'm the oldest, so they weren't even born yet, right? So looking back, I look at these TV shows with, like, My Little Pony and Care Bears, and I look at the underlying thing of why I was so attracted to that. And in My Little Ponies, it's this community, this group of ponies, right? And in Care Bears, it's also this group of Care Bears. And there's this underlying theme of there being this whole group dynamic, especially as a child who was very lonely growing up. Having that support system and seeing that on television and watching those cartoons and on TV, that was empowering for me, because I was able to reconcile the trauma that I had been going through as being an only child and being so lonely, right? So if you can remember, what are some of the shows that you've watched when you were really young? I know Jennifer was talking about, or Stephanie was talking about watching She-Ra, and she was talking about watching Rainbow Bright. So she had this. So in hers, it was Rainbow Bright had this girl called Wisp, right? And she was in this colorless world, this gray world. And she had this belt, and what she had to do is she had to go find all of the color kids, and then her mission was to transform this very dull gray world into a colorful world. And then she also talked about She-Ra, which is this woman who was separated from her brother, cousin, whatever, twin. I can't remember what He-Man was to her, but she was captured by these evil people, and she was brainwashed, and then she awoken to her true destiny to, help save the planet. So there's this repeating theme with Stephanie when she was talking about She-Ra and Rainbow Bright as this superhero archetype, right? Lynn says, I too am an only child, and in my day wasn't common. Yeah, it happens. It's definitely a wound, right? So think about these things that you watch. Think about these toys. Think about all of this stuff that provided you some measure of joy, right? And some measure of contentment and reconciliation. And I also want you to think back to around age 12. Because around age 12, right in that space between 12 and 13, in our society, we become a teenager. We start our journey towards becoming an adult at 18, right? So year 12 is really the last year that we have culturally that we are a child. After 12, we start to rebel. Our true self starts to kind of emerge, and we start questioning these things, these beliefs, these values that have been indoctrinated, that we have been indoctrinated into, right? And we start this whole rebellion. That's why teenagers are so difficult to deal with, and why they don't listen to their parents. because they are in the beginning stage of the emergence of the true self. Molly says Isis, Wonder Woman, Bionic Woman, Westerns. Okay, so you have, especially in the Westerns, you probably have these very, what kind of Westerns, I wonder? Wonder Woman, this very superheroic type of woman, the Bionic Woman. Okay, very interesting things here. Karen says, I just realized I hate pink because my dad wanted a son and I tried to be a tomboy for approval. I really liked Bagpuss, which is pure escapism. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting as we figure out what we actually hate because we actually hate it, or what we hate because we're in direct rebellion. Rachel says, first memory was my mother and father screaming and fighting over me not saying please for a glass of water. So, ungratefulness. Okay, that's one of the first shame and embarrassment for not feeling grateful or not having manners. She tried to stab him with a broken cup in the neck and cut her foot. My grandparents came in with a gun and there were cops and everything. That was the last time I had seen my father. Okay, so you have the father wound, you have the masculine wound as well. And you also have this image of your mother hurting someone that is supposed to be someone that is supposed to protect you and her. Jennifer says, Care Bears and My Little Pony were huge for me too. So much love and hugging in it. Also Barbie, stuffed animals, and dolls because I could be alone, hug them, and talk to them. I was really big on Barbies. I had tubs and tubs and tubs of Barbies too. I loved Barbies because I could basically what I would do is I would like do soap operas but with Barbies. And they would have like these lives and they would age and they'd have kids and it was this whole thing. 1950s Westerns. I wonder what about the 1950s Westerns that really piques your interest, Molly. Paula says, wow, almost drowned at about 9. I remember the most beautiful color blue, still my favorite, and I have no fear of death. Beam me up, Scotty. Barbara says, when I was 5, we lived in a house that had a poltergeist activity in it. Wow, okay, on a daily basis. That's scary. We would have company come over and things would fly across the room. One time I was alone and the ghosts come out to play. I thought there was no escape but to jump out a window. Thank God I didn't. Now I think spirits are just trying to communicate with me. Very interesting. So spirits and ghosts and things like that are going to be really integral to your brand, to what you do in the world. Rachel, I like Powerpuff Girls and Totally Spies. Powerpuff Girls was awesome. They're very kick-ass, very girl power kick-ass type of thing. Rachel says, and at age 12, my mom had recently tried to kill herself for the 4th time. Okay. So there's this abandonment with you. Abandonment. I was cutting and laid for hours in my room, writing, burning candles, and blasting Evanescence. Totally teen, but I did it. Yeah, that was your way of coping with it. Jennifer says, me too. I built houses and continued stories. I liked my Barbie, says Lynn. Molly, the Cowboys represented my dad. Okay. That's awesome. That's great insight. That is awesome insight. So, taking these things, all right, this is a little abstract here. Taking these things that we like about these shows and these things that we watched as children. Annie says at age 12, my mom passed away, or she died. Okay, yeah. Abandonment. Yeah, abandonment is a big one. I want you to think about what all these things have in common and how you can use these in your brand, because obviously I have this group. This is a big part of my life. Running this group is integral to my brand. It's, it's everything for me. It's where I find the most contentment and the most joy, right? And so it's interesting that the group dynamic is so important to me, and I look back at all of my intuitive interests as a young child, and I was always pulled towards the whole community dynamic with the ponies and the Care Bears, all these cooperative relationships, right? So if you can find certain things about what you really liked as a child and surround yourself with these things that actually represent that for you, you can find some really great clues about where you're going to find joy, where your vortex is actually located. Molly, age 12, I had already been working for a year. I was no longer a child. Absolutely, I'm with you right there. I grew up in a single income household, and I had my first job at 11, and I had my first business at 12. So I also deal with this whole thing where I had a childhood, but I didn't feel it was a satisfying childhood, and I didn't feel like I didn't feel like I got the full potential of what that could have been for me. And so now I do a lot of inner child work, and I surround myself with these things, and I've decided now that I can be a child at any point and also be an adult. And how this really ties in is, I said earlier on the post for today, how it ties is if your inner child doesn't trust, then it's going to be increasingly difficult to manage your follow through when it comes to actually launching your business and getting to a point where you are creating consistently, because your inner child needs an ally. So you recognize all of these things, and what happens is that you have all of these old wounds. And like I said, I'm not here to fix you, and I don't want you to eradicate these wounds, but I want you to integrate them. And how you integrate them is just by bringing them into your awareness, right? You just bring them in. You recognize them. You say, "Hi, I see you. That sucked, but I know that it wasn't my fault. I know that it had literally nothing to do with me." And see how that affects your ability to follow through in a lot of things. For example, for a long time, I wouldn't schedule, I wouldn't sell high-end packages where people would schedule out like 3 months at a time. Like now I do that no problem. But originally I could not do that, and I couldn't reach those higher package levels because I had deep-seated abandonment issues, and I would consistently doubt my ability to actually follow through, because I learned that people abandon people. And when I realized that, it's okay, I did a lot of forgiveness work on that. I did a lot of journaling. I came to peace with that. I integrated it into my vortex as something that existed without trying to fix it or eradicate it or get over it. I hate that. Why don't you just get over it? I hate that. I think it's really important to integrate it. And then I realized, the reason why I'm not selling these packages is because I have this irrational fear of abandonment. And the reason why I'm not taking these clients is because I have this fear that I'm going to abandon them, and then I'll be the same as that person who abandoned me. And you can't really explain it other than it's an irrational fear, because it's something that's been imprinted onto you at such a young age. And so when I finally realized that, is it really because I fear that I won't be able to show up, or is it because I don't want to recreate that trauma of abandoning someone? And when I really got serious and asked myself that question and got really in touch with my true self and who I really am, and looked at my past history of, actually, yeah, I do show up. Actually, yeah, I don't make a lot of excuses. Actually, yeah, I do keep my commitments. Okay, so if I looked at it in a rational way like that, then I was able to say, you know what, that's not real. That's not real. That's not going to happen. Why? Because I know myself better than that. That's not who I am. I'm going to show up for these appointments, right? So that was just one thing that I've dealt with this year, is really starting to get into selling the higher end packages where I'm scheduling out, people longer amounts of time out. And so far I haven't abandoned anybody. So I think it's important to ask yourself these questions, no matter what your wound is, or how it's manifesting, or how it's showing up, or how it's blocking you from making money. Ask yourself, is this something that I've learned? Is this an irrational fear? Or is this something that is real because my personal history says that that's what I've been doing, right? And these are the patterns that I've actually been manifesting. It's difficult. It takes a long time. You're not going to figure this out overnight. You're not going to figure it out in a week. Maybe you'll figure it out in a couple months or a year. It takes time. It takes time. Jennifer says, I wasn't ready for this. Little Jen is feeling like she's finally been heard. Right. And so once you actually, and that's where the adult comes in. It's because you say, actually, no, this is actually how it is. And you become your own adult. You become your own authority figure. And then you realize that the only disappointment in life that you're ever going to feel is because you disappointed yourself. And if you can live with that, then that's totally fine. It's totally cool if you can live with that. But we've really got to get off of this whole it's everybody else's fault, or it's because this happened to me in the past, and or a lot of it's denial. A lot of it's just denial. Molly says abandonment. Oh, Rachel says music and musicals. I memorized the choreography to Cats one summer in my room alone. That's so cool. I can remember it move by move today. So dancing is part of activating your inner child. And directing shows in my room and being a powerful hero of my own story was huge. I pushed my voice down. I pushed my voice in my body to its limits, and nobody else in the house knew because I had to be quiet at the same time. That's authentic because it's just for you, and you're not doing it for an audience. Molly says, abandonment manifests that way for me too, afraid to trust that I will show up and not abandon people. Molly, you're going to show up. Think about it. For the last 3 years, 2 or 3 years, I know that you've been around trying to start your business and run your business for the past couple of years. You haven't quit yet, so all signs point to you're not going to. Rachel says, abandonment is really big for me. I'm thinking, afraid of losing my daughter like my mother left me. Afraid of falling short, afraid of losing my love for a lot of things. Yeah. So we are at an hour and a half. So let's go ahead and wrap this up. The part of the journaling process that's really going to come in for you is I want you to take all of these aspects of these individual personalities that you have, and I want you to start creating this super personality. And we're going to call that your brand's personality. So what you're going to write about is I want you to tell me what your brand persona looks like, physically, what it looks like. I want you to describe her attitude, her mannerisms, if she has any catchphrases, like one of mine is work smarter, not harder. RuPaul says you better work, okay? These personalities, these super ego personalities have these sort of catchphrases and these attitudes and these mannerisms. And I want you to start thinking about that. I also want you to start thinking about what is she an expert in? And I want you to choose like 1 or 2 areas that she's really an expert in, where she truly shines, where she's extremely knowledgeable. Okay? I also want you to journal about how she handles difficult clients, how she handles conflict, right? That's part of processing the trauma. So you've had in your past how you've dealt with these things before, and so now today is a new day. Now today you can decide how, moving forward, how you're going to deal with conflict, how you're going to deal with trauma, how you're going to deal with difficult clients, right? Write it all down. This is another big one. How does she handle receiving positive attention, right? When you're saying, someone was saying earlier about how your earliest memory was feeling embarrassment for the kids singing to you at your birthday party. How do you handle receiving positive attention moving forward? And I also want you to start thinking about these mascots, okay? Think about, or if you're a witch, think about your familiar, or even your totem or your power symbol, okay? My power symbol is unicorns, rainbows, hearts, angels, fairies. All of these sorts of things that were integral to my joy as a child, right? Just go with that. I think that's enough for today. Does everybody feel like they were heard? Does everybody feel like they know what I'm trying to get you to do today? Does everybody feel good and like they know what they're going to be doing, what they're going to be writing about, and how this all ties in? If you have any questions, now is the time. And I'm going to be doing this myself. I'm doing this whole entire challenge with you. I started this morning, and I'll start picking back up on the whole personality thing tonight. Horse, snake, crow. Lots of soul searching. Yes, thank you. Everybody's good. Okay. I will see you tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're going to be doing something a little bit more uplifting, a little bit more fun. I think we're going to be doing mood boards, and we're going to be creating different mood boards for these different independent aspects of our personality. And then we're going to take these individual mood boards and we're going to create a super ego personality mood board based on all of these individual personalities. Okay, so we're going to make it something tangible tomorrow. I will see everybody tomorrow, and I'll see you in the Facebook group.